The sky beyond the airplane window was a painting, deep blue blending with streaks of golden orange. Alia stared blankly at the scene, her face calm but her heart far from still. The sunset was beautiful, yes, but tonight, even beauty failed to quiet the restlessness inside her. She adjusted her navy blue scarf, the uniform crisp and perfect as always. She had performed the same safety demonstrations, smiled at hundreds of faces, and served countless cups of coffee, but lately, everything felt mechanical. Lifeless. "Excuse me," a passenger said, waving for attention. Alia moved swiftly, her voice professional. "Yes, sir, how can I help?" Once she finished assisting him, she stepped behind the curtain dividing first class and economy. She exhaled deeply, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Al," a familiar voice called. Rachel, her colleague and longtime friend, peeked through the curtain. "You good?" Alia offered a thin smile. "Just tired." Rachel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Tired? You're never tired. Don't tell me the thrill of flying's finally wearing off." Alia gave a half-hearted shrug. "Sometimes I wonder if there's more to life than this." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "We travel the world for free, stay in 5-star hotels, get paid to be glamorous. You think too much, girl. Just enjoy it." Alia nodded, but her heart didn't agree. Rachel's words floated around her like a distant echo. Enjoy the world. Enjoy the world. As the plane descended toward New York, city lights twinkled like a galaxy below. Yet for Alia, it all looked strangely dull. Later that night, Alia stood alone in her luxurious Manhattan apartment. The view was magnificent, skyscrapers, endless traffic, a city that never slept. But none of it moved her anymore. She removed her coat, dropped her purse on the table, and just stood there, motionless. She turned toward the window, placing her fingers against the cold glass. Her own reflection stared back, successful, beautiful, and completely empty. Her phone buzzed. She didn't need to check the screen, she already knew. "Hey, Mom," she answered, trying to sound upbeat. "Hi, sweetheart," her mother said gently. "Just checking in. You sound tired." "I am. Long flight today." A pause. Then the inevitable question came. "When are you going to church again?" Alia hesitated. "I don't know. My schedule's been packed." "You've been distant lately, Alia." Her mother's voice grew more serious. "I know you're searching for something. But the answer's always been here, with us, with him. You just need to return to him." Alia swallowed hard. "Mom, I'm trying to figure things out." "Don't tell me you're doubting God?" "No. Not doubting, just wondering." "Don't talk like that." Her mother snapped, suddenly emotional. "We raised you with faith. You know the truth. What's missing is you, not the church, not the faith. You need to come back before you lose your way." After the call ended, Alia sat in silence. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, but instead of clarity, they stirred confusion. She wasn't sure if she was losing her way, or finally beginning to search for it. She walked back to the window, staring at the Manhattan skyline that once thrilled her. Everything she had once pursued, success, freedom, luxury, suddenly felt hollow. She reached for her phone and opened a flight booking app. Scrolling through destinations, her eyes stopped on one unfamiliar name, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. She paused. She had no connection to the place, no plan, no reason to go. And yet, something about it tugged at her heart. Maybe it was the distance. Maybe it was the idea of escaping the noise. Maybe it was something deeper. Without giving herself time to overthink, Alia booked a one-way ticket. 3 days later, she sat on another plane, this time, not as a flight attendant, but as a passenger. The flight was long, with a layover in Doha, but Alia hardly noticed the discomfort. She stared out of the window for most of the journey, her heart surprisingly calm. She didn't know what she was going to find in Yogyakarta. She just knew she had to go. When the wheels finally touched the runway at Yogyakarta International Airport, Alia slowly opened her eyes. The voice from the loudspeaker welcomed passengers to Indonesia. Outside, the sky was bright and scattered with thin clouds, the air warm and humid. She stepped out of the plane and felt it immediately. This wasn't New York. This was something else entirely. The airport was smaller, simpler. No rush. No high heels clicking against marble floors. No suits pacing in phone calls. Just people, calm, smiling people, living life at a gentler pace. Alia collected her suitcase and walked through the exit. A driver stood with a sign bearing her name. She nodded politely and got into the modest white taxi. The driver, a man in his 40s, greeted her with a warm smile. His English was broken, but his friendliness needed no translation. As they drove through the city, Alia watched motorbikes weave through traffic, families sitting in open warongs, local food stalls, students laughing under trees. There were no towering buildings. No fashion billboards. No rush. Life here looked simple. And yet beautiful. She reached her hotel on Malioboro Street and entered her room on the 3rd floor. From the window, she could see the bustling street below, vendors selling satay, children playing near parked scooters, and an old man playing a bamboo flute under a tree. The scent of spices drifted in through the open window. Somewhere nearby, a call to prayer began to echo, soft and melodic. Alia sat on the edge of the bed, soaking it all in. This wasn't a vacation. It felt more like a beginning. She picked up her phone and searched. Things to do in Yogyakarta. An article about a quiet temple nestled in the hills caught her eye. It promised peace and a panoramic view. Just what she needed. The next morning, she rented a motorbike and set off. The roads were winding and green, sunlight streaming through tall banana trees and rice paddies stretching endlessly. For a while, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, freedom. Then, the motorbike jerked violently. A flat tire. Alia swerved to the side of the road, her heart pounding. She got off and stared helplessly at the tire. Her phone showed no signal. No taxis, no buses, no people. Except, across the road, a small tire repair shop. A single man sat there, focused on a thick book in his lap. Taking a breath, Alia crossed the street. She had no idea that this small encounter was about to change her life forever. Alia approached the small tire repair shop with cautious steps. The sun was getting warmer, and the hum of insects filled the quiet roadside. The man seated there didn't notice her at first. His eyes were absorbed in a thick, worn book resting on a small wooden table. His posture was relaxed yet focused. It felt like he belonged to the moment in a way Alia rarely saw in New York. "Excuse me," she said softly, unsure if he spoke English. The man looked up. His face was calm, his gaze direct. His eyes, dark and thoughtful, held none of the judgment or curiosity she often saw when people realized she was foreign. Instead, there was an unusual stillness, like he saw right through the noise. "My motorbike, the tire's flat," Alia continued, pointing behind her. He stood up without a word and walked over to inspect it. "Okay. I can fix it," he said in accented but clear English. She blinked, surprised. "You speak English well." The man smiled faintly as he crouched beside the tire. "I studied in school. And from visitors like you." Alia watched as he worked. His hands moved with practiced ease, unscrewing, checking, patching. No wasted motions. No complaints. She could smell the faint scent of rubber and oil, but there was something oddly comforting about the place. "What's your name?" she asked after a few moments. "Azam. I'm Alia." He nodded, still focused on the wheel. "You are from America?" "Yes." "What brings you to Yogyakarta?" Alia hesitated. She'd asked herself the same question many times since arriving. I guess I'm looking for something. Azam paused, looked up at her, then back at the tire. Most people who come here are. His answer struck her more deeply than she expected. A few minutes later, the tire was patched and reinflated. Azam stood and wiped his hands with an old cloth. Alia noticed the book still sitting on the table, pages fluttering in the breeze. What were you reading? She asked, curiosity growing. Tafsir, he replied simply. Interpretation of the Qur'an. Alia tilted her head. So, you're religious? Azam glanced at her. I try to be. You studied this, where? I'm a graduate of Gontar, he replied. An Islamic boarding school. Her eyebrows lifted. A boarding school? I thought you worked here full-time. I do. But before that, I studied for years. What do they teach there? Just religion? Not just religion, he said with a quiet pride. We learn language, philosophy, logic, history, economics, even science. Alia was impressed. Sounds intense. It is. But it shapes you, how you think, how you live, how you understand the world. She was silent for a while, absorbing his words. Something about Azam was unlike anyone she'd ever met. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't pushing his beliefs. He simply lived them. As she got back on her motorbike, she looked at him one last time. Thank you? Azam nodded. You're welcome. Ride safe. Alia rode back to the hotel, but her thoughts stayed behind at that small repair shop. She had expected beautiful temples, street food, and maybe peace of mind. But she hadn't expected this. A quiet man with a dusty book who had said more in a few minutes than most people said in hours. That night in her room, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She searched for Gontar online. Dozens of results popped up. She clicked on one article. It described a highly disciplined Islamic boarding school in East Java, known for producing scholars, thinkers, and even diplomats. The curriculum wasn't just spiritual. It was academic, intellectual, practical. Alia scrolled through pictures of students in white uniforms, peaceful classrooms, libraries filled with books. She had never seen religion presented like this, thoughtful, disciplined, humble. She thought of Azam's eyes again. There had been no arrogance in them. Only clarity. The next morning, Alia walked to a coffee shop near Malioboro Street. She sipped a cup of strong black coffee, watching locals go about their routines. A woman in a colorful hijab fed her toddler beside her. An elderly man in batik clothes laughed with a friend. It was a different kind of life, slower, more rooted. Her phone vibrated. It was her mother. Alia hesitated before answering. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetie. Are you all right? You haven't posted anything in days. I'm fine. Just thinking a lot. Her mother's voice softened. You're not still confused, are you? You know the answer, Alia. You just need to come home and find your way again. Alia didn't respond. The truth was, she wasn't confused anymore. She was curious. And for the first time in years, her heart felt awake. Later that afternoon, without knowing exactly why, she returned to the tire shop. Azam was there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading from the same book. When he saw her, he looked up with a calm smile. You're back, he said. Alia shifted awkwardly. Yeah. I had more questions. He closed the book gently. I'll try to answer. She took a seat on the wooden bench. What makes you so sure? Sure about what? Your belief. Your way of life. Your God. Azam was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, slowly and thoughtfully. Because everything in this world, every tree, every atom, every star, has a purpose. Nothing happens by accident. Not even you coming here. Alia frowned slightly. But science explains those things. Science is one way of seeing them, Azam replied. But what if science doesn't conflict with faith? What if it supports it? He picked up a small stick and drew lines in the dirt near the bench. If you found a beautiful house in the middle of nowhere, with clean floors, working electricity, windows perfectly installed, would you believe it built itself? Of course not, she replied instinctively. Exactly, Azam said. So why do we believe this world, which is far more complex, came from nothing? Alia blinked. I never thought about it like that. Most people don't, Azam said gently. They're too busy. Alia looked away, her thoughts racing. They sat in silence for a while. The wind rustled the leaves. The call to prayer echoed faintly from a nearby mosque. Finally, she spoke again. Do you ever doubt? Sometimes. That's part of being human. But when I do, I ask. And when I ask, I'm always answered. Alia nodded slowly, unsure of what she believed yet, but certain of one thing: Azam had something she wanted. Not his job. Not his knowledge. But his peace. Would you mind if I came back again? Azam smiled softly. You're welcome any time. As she walked away that day, something inside her shifted. A piece of the emptiness she'd carried for years had cracked, just enough to let something new in. The next few days in Yogyakarta moved gently, like the slow sway of palm trees in the morning wind. Alia found herself returning to the tire shop more often, at first, telling herself it was just curiosity. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Something about Azam's presence calmed her. Every time she sat near him, questions poured out of her like they'd been bottled up for years. How do you know Allah is real? Why does Islam have so many rules? What makes your faith stronger, not weaker, when things go wrong? Azam never scolded her for asking. He welcomed her questions with patience and humility, as if he'd asked them all himself once. And in the space between his words, Alia began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: relief. One afternoon, as they sat under the same shady tree by the shop, she looked at him with tired eyes. Do you think it's possible that I'm here, not by chance? Azam smiled faintly. There's no such thing as coincidence. Only purpose. Alia lowered her gaze. Then why has my life felt so empty? Because maybe it was full of the wrong things, he answered gently. Sometimes we chase freedom and end up further away from what our soul needs. His words stung, but only because they were true. Back in New York, Alia had everything: a stable career, a luxury apartment, freedom to travel anywhere. But none of it had quieted the constant ache in her heart. Now, sitting on a wooden bench in a dusty corner of Yogyakarta, she felt something that resembled peace for the first time in years. Can I ask more questions? She said. Azam chuckled. As many as you need. She hesitated, then said, Why do you follow Islam so strictly? Aren't all religions the same at their core? Azam nodded thoughtfully. Many religions teach goodness. But Islam gives a framework, not just what to believe, but how to live. He paused, then added, When you're on a plane, do you ever try to fly it yourself? Alia laughed. Of course not. There's a trained pilot. Exactly, he said. You trust the pilot with your life. Islam teaches us to trust Allah, who created the universe. He gave us instructions. Why wouldn't we follow them? Alia went quiet. The comparison felt oddly perfect. On every flight, she placed her trust in a stranger. But she had never considered placing her trust in something eternal. Still, she murmured, I don't want to believe just because someone tells me to. You shouldn't, Azam said firmly. You should believe because your heart is convinced. That evening, back at her hotel, Alia sat cross-legged on the floor, her mind swirling. She remembered what Azam had said about asking for guidance directly from the source. God, she whispered into the silence, if you are really there, Show me. Please. She didn't expect a voice. She didn't expect a miracle. But what she felt next surprised her. Warmth. Not physical. Not emotional. Something deeper. A presence, like an invisible comfort gently wrapping around her. Her eyes welled up with tears, not from sadness, but from a strange, overwhelming sense of being heard. She didn't understand it fully, but in that moment, something inside her shifted again. She was no longer just curious. She was seeking. The next morning, she woke up early and walked to the tire shop with a new kind of determination. Azam was already there, as usual, reading quietly. He looked up as she arrived, sensing the change in her expression. Something's different, he said. I prayed last night, she admitted. Not like I used to. I just asked God to guide me. And? I don't know how to explain it. But I felt not alone. Azam nodded slowly, a gentle smile forming. That's how it begins. That day, their conversation went deeper. Alia asked about the Qur'an, about the Prophet Muhammad, about the meaning of prayer in Islam. She asked about life after death, about the soul, about forgiveness. Azam answered carefully, always letting her reflect before saying more. I've never met someone like you, she confessed at one point. I'm not special, he replied. I just believe that truth, when shared with sincerity, speaks for itself. Later that evening, back in her room, Alia looked at the Qur'an she had borrowed from a small bookstore earlier that day. She opened it randomly, eyes scanning the translation slowly. Her fingers trembled as she read verses about mercy, purpose, and the signs in the creation of the heavens and the earth. It wasn't just poetic. It felt personal. She whispered again, Guide me. The next few days passed like a blur. Alia began dressing more modestly, not because anyone told her to, but because it felt right. She walked slower, listened more, and kept returning to the tire shop, where her questions found space to breathe. One afternoon, after a long discussion, she looked at Azam and said, I think I understand why you live like this. Like what? Simple. Peaceful. Anchored. Azam's eyes softened. It wasn't always easy. But when I stopped chasing what the world called success, I found something more valuable. Alia nodded. I want that too. Azam looked at her carefully. Are you sure? No, she admitted. But I want to keep walking toward it. That night, she cried again. Not from confusion, but from clarity. She was beginning to see. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the truth. Morning in Yogyakarta broke gently, with soft sunlight spilling through the gaps in Alia's hotel window. She sat by the edge of her bed, staring at the sky, listening to the distant sound of birds and the faint echo of the far call to prayer. She hadn't slept much. Last night, after returning from the tire shop, she had prayed again, not in the way she'd once memorized as a child, but in her own raw, quiet way. No rituals, no rehearsed phrases. Just heart. And in return, she felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. It was the kind of peace she had chased her entire life, through jobs, travel, parties, relationships, but had never been able to catch. Now, it arrived like a gift, without condition, without noise. She got dressed simply and walked to the shop. As she approached, she saw Azam seated on the wooden bench, sipping tea and reading. The scent of tire rubber and morning dew mixed in the air. Good morning, he greeted, setting the book down. Good morning, she replied, her voice softer than usual. You look clearer, he said. I feel different. Azam watched her for a moment. What's on your mind? She took a breath. Azam. I think I believe. I don't have all the answers yet, but something inside me says this is the truth. And I'm ready to act on it. For a long moment he didn't respond. Then he smiled, a deep, warm, knowing smile. Then you're ready to say the Shahada? he said gently. The declaration? She asked. Yes. It's the testimony of faith. It's simple but powerful. It means you accept that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. Alia's heart began to race. Is it okay if I'm not perfect yet? None of us are, Azam said. That's not a requirement. What matters is that you believe, and that you're sincere. Alia sat down slowly on the bench, her hands trembling slightly. The air around her felt heavier, charged with emotion. Azam stood up. Come with me, he said. They walked through quiet side streets until they reached a small mosque tucked between houses. It was simple, white walls, green dome, and a peaceful garden. Birds chirped in the trees, and a soft breeze blew through the prayer hall. A woman greeted them inside, an Ustadza Azam had called earlier. She spoke English well and had kind eyes. Alia removed her shoes and entered the prayer area, where the floor was covered in soft green carpet. The Ustadza walked her through what she needed to say and asked if she truly believed. I do, Alia whispered. Then say it with your heart. Alia looked down, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then, with a voice that shook at first but grew stronger with every word, she said, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. The room was silent. Alia blinked, and the tears came, quiet, unforced, cleansing. Her heart felt like it had been unchained. She had crossed over into a new life. Not a perfect one. Not an easy one. But a life rooted in truth. Azam stood by the doorway, smiling gently. How do you feel? He asked when she walked out. Alia wiped her tears with the sleeve of her blouse. I feel free. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Alia sat on the front steps of her hotel, watching the golden light spill over Yogyakarta's rooftops. Her heart was full, her mind at ease. The journey that had begun with a single click on a flight app had brought her here, to a new identity, a new faith, a new peace. But not everyone would understand. Her phone buzzed. It was a call from her mother. Her breath caught in her throat. She answered. Alia. Her mother's voice was sharp, almost panicked. What are you doing over there? Alia paused. Mom, I have something to tell you. What is it? I've become Muslim. There was silence on the other end. Then came the voice she feared most, cold, disappointed, trembling with disbelief. Don't joke with me. I'm not joking, Mom. I've thought about this deeply. I've prayed. I've studied. I believe it. You've lost your mind, her mother snapped. After everything we've done for you? You're throwing it away for what? For some stranger in a foreign country? This isn't about anyone else, Alia said, her voice cracking. This is between me and God. You've broken my heart, Alia. The line went dead. Alia stared at the screen, tears forming again, but this time from a different kind of pain. This was the price of truth. And it hurt more than she expected. She didn't move for a long time. Azam found her there just before the Maghrib prayer. He didn't say anything. Just sat beside her. She hung up, Alia said quietly. She thinks I've betrayed her. Azam nodded slowly. Many people go through this. Rejection. Pain. Even loss. But you haven't betrayed anyone, Alia. You followed the truth. Alia wiped her cheeks. It just hurts. I know, he said. But Allah sees every tear. He knows your heart. That night Alia didn't sleep much. She spent hours reading the Qur'an, whispering short verses she was just beginning to understand. And in the stillness of those hours she made a quiet vow. I will walk this path, no matter what. Days passed. Alia began learning how to pray with the help of the Ustadza. She practiced reading Arabic letters, recited small du'as, and learned how to perform wudu. Every step felt like peeling away layers she never knew she wore. But the wound with her mother remained open. Messages left unread. Calls unanswered. Silence where love used to live. And still, Alia held on. She kept going to the tire shop, not with questions this time, but with conversation. She and Azam began talking more about life, about balance, about faith and action. One afternoon, as Azam handed a customer their repaired motorbike, Alia said, "Can I ask something personal?" He glanced at her. "Of course. Why do you work here? You're educated. You could do more." Azam smiled. "Because this work keeps me grounded. I meet people. I serve. I live simply. And I stay close to what matters. But don't you ever want more? More?" He chuckled. "I have what I need. I have peace. That's enough." Alia stared at him. And for the first time, she realized he wasn't just her guide to Islam. He was someone whose presence had shaped her heart. And maybe, just maybe, it had become something more. The air in Yogyakarta had begun to change. The rains were coming more often now, soft showers that left the streets shimmering and the trees a deeper shade of green. Alia sat beneath the awning of the tire shop, sipping warm tea from a small glass. The scent of wet earth lingered around them, as if the city itself had been washed clean. Azam was sitting across from her, focused as always, adjusting the spokes of a motorbike wheel. His hands worked with care, the same hands that once held a book of tafsir when they first met. Now, weeks later, their conversations had moved beyond questions of belief. They had reached into something neither of them could ignore, something tender, unspoken, and growing. Alia watched him in silence, her heart a storm of thoughts. She couldn't deny it anymore. She had developed feelings for him. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. It was the kind of love that emerged through stillness, watching someone pray without missing a beat, seeing him greet the poor and wealthy with the same respect, noticing how he paused every task to answer her questions with patience. It was the kind of love built not on appearance, but on character. But it terrified her. Because she didn't want to love someone who couldn't love her back. "I've been thinking," Alia said one evening, breaking the silence. Azam looked up, attentive. "About what?" "About freedom," she said. "Back in New York I thought I was free. But I wasn't. I was just drifting. Now I follow rules, wear modest clothes, pray 5 times a day. And yet, I've never felt freer." Azam nodded slowly. "True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's choosing what's right, even when it's hard." Alia smiled faintly. "That's what you taught me." There was a pause. "And Azam," she continued, her voice trembling slightly, "I also realized something else." She hesitated. I've grown to care for you." Azam's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened slightly, as though he had been expecting this moment. "Alia," he said gently, "you're dear to me. You always will be. But love, real love, has to exist within the same direction. Same path. Same purpose." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I told you. I didn't want it to grow in the wrong way." Azam exhaled slowly, setting down his tools. He turned to her fully now, his eyes soft but serious. "I won't deny I've thought about it too," he said quietly. "But I didn't want to speak before you were ready. I needed to know that your journey to Islam was about Allah, not me." Alia nodded, grateful. "It was. It still is." "And now?" he asked. "No," she said, her voice clear. "I want to continue that journey, with someone who will walk beside me." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Then Azam smiled. "I need to pray istikhara," he said. "This decision, marriage, it's not small. It's not just about emotion. It's about responsibility. About commitment. About leading someone toward Jannah. I understand, she said softly. A few days passed. Azam kept his distance, not out of coldness, but to give both of them space to seek clarity. Alia spent the time in quiet reflection. She read more of the Qur'an. She walked alone by the rice fields. She prayed not for what she wanted, but for what was best. Finally, the morning came. Alia returned to the tire shop with a nervous heart. Azam was already waiting. He stood when he saw her, the morning light casting a golden hue on his calm face. I've prayed, he said simply. Alia's breath caught. And? He smiled slowly. Alia, I would be honored to marry you. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but this time, they didn't fall from fear or uncertainty. They were tears of peace, of gratitude. Of coming full circle. They held their nikah in the same modest mosque where Alia first said her shahada. There was no grand celebration. Just sincerity, a few witnesses, and two hearts joined for the sake of Allah. After the ceremony, as Alia sat beside Azam on the mosque veranda, the sound of the afternoon azan echoing through the air, she whispered, I never thought my journey to find God would lead me to a partner too. Azam turned to her, his expression filled with warmth. When you walk toward Allah, He sends people who walk with you. Months passed. Alia no longer stayed in the hotel. She and Azam lived modestly, in a small home near the workshop. She continued her Islamic studies, now under the guidance of a local ustadza, and helped translate Islamic literature into English for a Dawah organization. Her mother still hadn't come around. But Hannah, her childhood best friend, had started messaging her again, curious about the changes in Alia's life. The door was still open, and Alia had hope. One day, while sipping tea with Azam after the Asr prayer, she said, I lost a lot when I chose this path, but I also gained everything I didn't know I needed. Azam nodded. That's the nature of truth. It costs something. But it gives more. She looked at him, this man who once patched her tire on a random roadside. And she whispered with a smile, I think Allah sent you to fix more than just a motorbike that day. He laughed gently. And I think He sent you to remind me of the beauty of guidance. That evening, as they stood outside under a sky full of stars, Alia felt something she had never felt before, not just happiness, but contentment. Not the fleeting kind that fades with success or disappears with failure, but the kind that only comes when your heart finally knows, I'm home. A wealthy widow from France, abandoned by her husband, never imagined that she would one day find true love in the most unexpected place, in a humble satay seller from a small coastal town in Indonesia. But the man she would come to know held a secret so powerful, it would forever alter the course of her life. Before we dive into this extraordinary journey, take a deep breath. Imagine yourself sitting on a wooden bench beside the River Seine in Paris, the afternoon sun casting long golden reflections over the quiet waters. That was where Mari sat, lost in thought. Paris, the city she once adored, now felt hollow. Empty. Foreign. It had been 2 months since her husband, Philippe, had left her. No warnings. No fights. Just a cold letter and a sudden, silent disappearance that ended 15 years of marriage. For years, Mari believed she had it all. A luxurious apartment in the heart of Paris. Travels across Europe and beyond. Glittering parties filled with the laughter of socialites, sparkling wine, and expensive jewelry. But it was all an illusion. Behind Philippe's loyal smile was betrayal, and another woman. That night, in her spacious but soul-crushingly empty apartment, Mari pulled out an old photo album tucked away in her closet. She flipped through its pages slowly until her eyes stopped on a photograph, a moment frozen in time. It was taken in Indonesia 5 years ago, during a trip with Philippe. They had visited Bali, Yogyakarta, and a place she barely remembered at the time, Banyuwangi. In the photo, they stood together by the ocean, the sky painted in colors of a glowing sunset. Back then, she had smiled, unaware that those joyful memories would someday become painful reminders. Mari closed the album with a sigh heavier than words. She couldn't stay in Paris. Not with the ghosts of her past haunting every street and cafe. She needed to escape. Without thinking twice, she booked a flight to Indonesia. The plane touched down at Ngurah Rai International Airport in Bali after the long journey from France. As she stepped off, the warm air and the scent of salt water greeted her like an old friend. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. For a moment, she felt peace. At first, she intended to stay in Bali for a couple of weeks. But the city, now bustling with tourists and crowded beaches, felt too noisy for her fragile heart. She craved stillness, something quieter, gentler. It was a conversation with a taxi driver that sparked a new direction. "There's a small town in East Java, ma'am," the driver had said. "Banyuwangi. Very quiet, very natural. The beaches there are still pure. A lot of foreigners go, but it's not crowded." Mari had paused, then asked, "Can you take me there?" The driver looked surprised but nodded. "If you'd like, we can leave right away." And so she did, with only a small suitcase and no plan, just an aching need to feel something real. The road to Banyuwangi was long, winding through fields of lush green rice paddies and narrow village roads flanked by palm trees. Occasionally, she saw farmers hunched over in the sun, working the land with quiet determination. It was a world far removed from the polished glass of Parisian towers, but strangely, her heart felt lighter here. When they arrived, Mari found a small inn by the beach. It was simple, almost rustic, nothing like the luxury hotels she was used to. But the breeze that rolled in from the ocean, the sound of waves breaking on the shore, and the quiet hum of nature brought her a kind of comfort she hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while walking through a local market, a savory scent drifted through the air, rich, smoky, and mouth-watering. Curious, she followed it to a man behind a satay cart, carefully grilling skewers over hot coals. "Goat satay, ma'am," the man said with a warm smile. "Freshly grilled. Very delicious." Mari looked at him. His face was deeply lined, his hair touched with gray, and his clothes simple. Yet there was something about him, a sense of peace in his presence. She nodded and ordered a portion. When she took her first bite, she blinked in surprise. "This is amazing." The man chuckled gently. "I'm glad you like it. My name is Hassan." "I'm Mari," she replied. And so began the first of many quiet conversations. Over the next few days, she found herself returning to Mr. Hassan's satay cart, not just for the food, but for the stories he shared. Stories of the town, of everyday struggles, of joy and simplicity, and of resilience. Mari would sit on a small bench beside his cart, listening intently, her heart slowly softening with every tale. It was strange. She barely knew him, yet something about the way he spoke, slow, steady, full of gratitude, calmed the storm inside her. It reminded her of something she had forgotten, that warmth and kindness didn't come from wealth or reputation. They came from sincerity. Mari had no idea then that their meeting was more than chance. That this quiet satay seller, with his worn hands and soft eyes, held a past that would soon unravel everything she thought she knew about love, life, and faith. That afternoon, as the breeze danced along the edge of Banyuwangi's shore and the sun dipped low in the sky, Mr. Hassan quietly prepared his satay. He pierced the meat with bamboo skewers and carefully tended the glowing embers, the scent of char and spice filling the air. Mari sat nearby, as she often did now, watching him with quiet interest. "You're different," she said softly. "The way you speak, the way you work. There's something about you that's not ordinary." Mr. Hassan paused, his gaze fixed on the fire. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice low and steady, he replied, "Because I'm not just a satay seller." Mr. Hassan finally said, his voice low and steady, "There was a time I owned a large textile business, hundreds of employees, a comfortable life. I thought I had everything." Mari looked at him, stunned. She hadn't expected the quiet man in front of her, grilling meat on the street corner, to have once been a successful entrepreneur. But life, he continued, doesn't always go the way we hope. His voice didn't waver, but there was pain hidden in the spaces between his words. The person I trusted most, my closest friend, betrayed me. He falsified documents, took over the business, and left me with nothing. Mr. Hassan took a deep breath, his gaze drifting toward the sea. I tried to fight it, to seek justice. But in the end, money and power won. I had to surrender. Everything I built vanished in an instant. Mari felt the tightness in her chest. She knew the pain of betrayal all too well. To lose everything because of someone you trusted was a wound few could understand. "What about your family?" she asked softly. Mr. Hassan gave a faint smile, but his eyes were heavy with grief. "My wife was a patient woman. Always kind, always supportive. But she became ill. We searched everywhere for a cure. But nothing worked. In the end, she left this world, and I was left alone." Mari lowered her gaze, her heart aching for him. To lose everything, wealth, trust, love, and still carry on, it was a strength she didn't know if she possessed. After she passed, Mr. Hassan continued, "I wandered from one city to another. No home. No work. No one waiting for me. I became just an old man searching for a reason to keep going." He paused, then added, "That's how I ended up in Banyuwangi. I saw others selling satay and thought, maybe this is my path." He chuckled softly. "At first, I didn't have money to start. So I helped others. I watched how they marinated the meat, how they grilled it, how they served their customers. I learned. Slowly. Patiently." Mari listened with awe. Life had tested this man in the harshest of ways, yet here he was, still standing, still smiling, still kind. "And now?" she asked. "You still sell satay, even though you could have done something else?" Mr. Hassan smiled, this time with more peace in his expression. "I could chase other things, but I don't want to chase anymore. I've lived that life. Now I just want simplicity. I want to wake up every day and feel no burden. I meet people. I share stories. I serve food with my own hands. And in all of that, I feel useful." Mari sat quietly, his words echoing in her heart. A simple life. No ambitions. No masks. Just calm and purpose. Wasn't that what she had been searching for all along? Over the days that followed, Mari found herself returning more and more to Mr. Hassan's stall. Not just for the satay, but for the warmth. The familiarity. The quiet strength in his stories. His presence calmed her in ways she couldn't explain. She found herself waiting for the sound of his voice, for his gentle laugh, for the way he spoke about life not with bitterness, but with understanding. Her heart, once shattered and scattered across foreign cities, began to piece itself back together, little by little, moment by moment. One evening, while they sat near the beach on a worn wooden bench, Mari looked out toward the ocean. She had come to Indonesia to escape the noise. But now she realized she had found more than peace. She had found someone who made her feel seen, valued, heard. And perhaps for the first time in her life, she began to understand true happiness doesn't always live in mansions or dinner parties. Sometimes it lives behind a small food cart under the dim glow of a street lamp. She looked toward Mr. Hassan, who was quietly cleaning his satay grill, bathed in the amber hue of the fading light. He looked content, not because he had much, but because he had let go of wanting more. Mari smiled to herself. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain, something in her had changed. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the eastern horizon, casting a soft glow across Banyuwangi's quiet beach. The waves moved in a soothing rhythm, and the breeze brushed gently against Mari's face as she walked alone along the shoreline. She had now lived in this peaceful town for several months. And during that time, something within her had begun to shift. She no longer craved the noise of Paris, the glint of diamonds, the clicks of wine glasses, the endless need to be seen. Here, life was simple. Honest. The people greeted her with warm smiles, even if they had little to give. Their joy was not in things, but in gratitude. Yet, despite the calm in her soul, something else tugged at her heart, something deeper. Something spiritual. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Islam, the way of life she saw in every corner of this town, was drawing her in, like a quiet melody you don't understand but can't stop humming. It started with small things. She often saw Mr. Hassan leave his cart during Maghrib, walking quietly to the small mosque nearby. At first, Mari hadn't paid much attention. But over time, she began to wonder. One afternoon, as Mr. Hassan was preparing to go, Mari finally asked, "Why do you go to the mosque every day?" He smiled gently. "Because prayer is an obligation for us Muslims. But it's more than that. In the mosque, we not only worship, we connect. We find our brothers, our community. We strengthen each other." His answer was simple, but it stayed with her. After that, she started noticing more. The honesty of small traders, even when struggling. A mother giving thanks for a pot of rice and boiled vegetables, smiling as if she had a feast. Elderly men sitting quietly after prayer, speaking of life not with regret, but with serenity. It all made Mari wonder, how could people with so little have so much? One evening, as the adhan rang out, the call to prayer echoing softly across the village, Mari stood by her window, her heart stirring. She had followed the sound of satay to Mr. Hassan. Now she felt another calling, one she could no longer ignore. She made a decision. She would visit the mosque Mr. Hassan often went to. Mari didn't intend to go inside the mosque. At first, she simply sat on a wooden bench just outside, listening. From within, the voice of an ustaz echoed gently into the courtyard. "We have all felt lost, abandoned, alone. But remember, every trial is a sign of Allah's love. He never leaves us, even when the whole world seems to turn its back." Each word pierced her heart. It was as if the Imam were speaking directly to her pain, to her story. She began returning to the mosque frequently. Sometimes just to listen. Sometimes to ask Mr. Hassan questions she was too shy to ask others. The more she learned, the more a strange peace began to grow inside her, a peace deeper than anything she had known before. But the decision to embrace Islam wasn't an easy one. Mari wrestled with herself night after night. She imagined the reaction of her family in France, how shocked, how outraged they would be if they knew she was even considering Islam. Would they abandon her? Would they think she had lost her mind? She stared at the stars from the veranda of her small inn. The night sky over Banyuwangi was vast, clear, and scattered with light. In her heart she whispered, "Is this really the path I'm meant to take?" The next morning, she found Mr. Hassan preparing his satay cart. "I want to learn more about Islam," she said hesitantly. "But I'm afraid." Mr. Hassan paused, looked at her kindly, and asked, "Afraid of what, Mari?" She took a long breath. "My family. My friends. They won't understand." Mr. Hassan smiled gently. "The biggest decisions in life are rarely easy. But if your heart is certain, don't let fear hold you back. In the end, it's not people's opinions that matter, it's the peace in your soul." His words stayed with her. A few days later, Mari stood inside the mosque. The room was quiet. An ustaz sat in front of her, smiling warmly. "Are you ready?" he asked. Mari nodded slowly. "I've thought deeply about this. I believe I've found the truth." With Mr. Hassan standing quietly nearby, Mari uttered the Shahida, the declaration of faith. Her voice was steady, filled with conviction. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks, not of sadness, but of serenity. Of arrival. Mr. Hassan watched with emotion in his eyes. He knew what this meant for her, the courage it took to embrace something so different from the world she once knew. News of her conversion spread quickly through the town. Some welcomed her warmly. Others were puzzled. A few even whispered questions. Why would a wealthy Frenchwoman choose this path? Why give up a life of comfort for something so simple? But the real storm came from home. When Mari informed her family in France, the backlash was swift. Her younger brother, once her closest confidant, was furious. "Have you completely lost your mind?" he shouted over the phone. "This isn't you, Mari. You've abandoned who you are." But Mari remained calm. "I haven't lost myself," she said quietly. "For the first time, I've found myself." But her trials weren't over. One quiet afternoon, the golden glow of the Banyuwangi sky offered no comfort to the storm rising inside her. That morning, an email had arrived from her lawyer in France. The subject line alone made her chest tighten. She opened the attached document with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the screen, line by line. And then, her heart sank. Philippe had remarried. And not just to anyone, to Claire, her closest friend. The woman she had once trusted with every secret. The woman who had comforted her during her darkest moments after Philippe left. They had been together. All along. The marriage had taken place shortly after Philippe vanished from her life. Mari couldn't believe it. She shook her head, praying it was some kind of mistake. A cruel joke. But the reality was undeniable. It was written clearly, in legal words and court-stamped documents. Her heart collapsed. She paced back and forth in her room, reliving the past, the shared memories with Claire, the laughter, the promises of loyalty. "I'll always support you, Mari. You deserve the best," Claire had once said. Now those words felt like poison. Her phone rang. The name on the screen made her stomach turn, her lawyer. She picked up, barely able to hold the phone. "Mari." The lawyer's voice was careful, hesitant. "I know this is incredibly difficult to hear, but there's more." Mari couldn't speak. Her lips trembled. "Your husband, Philippe, didn't just remarry. I'm afraid the assets you shared, the properties, the joint accounts, they're all gone. Everything is now under his name. Legally, you have nothing left." Mari froze. Her mind blank. Her fingers numb. She hung up the phone and dropped to the floor, staring at the wall in disbelief. In seconds her world had turned upside down. She was no longer a wealthy woman from Paris. The grand apartment, the jewelry, the savings, gone. Stolen by the very people she had trusted most. But it wasn't just about wealth. It was about betrayal. About being discarded by the two people who had meant the most. She wanted to scream. To demand justice. But where could she go? She was alone, in a distant country, with no one to call, no one except one person. Mr. Hassan. Her legs felt like lead as she made her way to the familiar spot, the sade cart lit by a small street lamp. Mr. Hassan stood behind it, tending the flames, turning skewers quietly. When he saw her, he turned, concern washing over his face. "Mari? What's wrong? You look pale." She couldn't hold it in any longer. She sat down on the wooden bench and burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Mr. Hassan didn't say anything at first. He didn't move. He simply sat beside her in silence, letting her grieve. "I've lost everything," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Everything I had, it's gone." He looked at her, calm and kind. "Who took it?" "My ex-husband," she whispered, wiping her tears. "And my best friend." Mr. Hassan sighed deeply. Not in surprise, but in understanding, as though he had seen too many people fall to the cruelty of the world. He didn't respond with platitudes or false comfort. He just stayed there, by her side. In the quiet hum of the night, as the scent of grilled meat rose into the air, Mari sat on that bench, heartbroken but no longer alone. "So now, you have nothing left?" Mr. Hassan asked gently. Mari nodded, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what to do." Mr. Hassan didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, his gaze calm and steady, the kind of calm that comes from having known suffering and surviving it. "I've been where you are, Mari," he said finally. "I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel like the ground has crumbled beneath your feet. But when life brings us to our knees, maybe that's exactly where we need to be to start over." That night, something shifted in Mari's heart. She had no money, no title, no family to return to. And yet, in front of her was someone who never turned away, someone who had nothing to gain yet stayed. And quietly, without her even realizing it, something began to bloom within her, a new feeling. Soft at first, but growing stronger with every moment shared beside the humble satay seller. But life, as always, had more surprises in store. The winds along the Banyuwangi coast felt cooler than usual. The air carried with it a whisper, as if the world was preparing her for something new. Mari had accepted a new way of life, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. She no longer craved the glitter of Paris. Now, she found peace in helping Mr. Hassan clean his stall, prepare ingredients, and talk with neighbors between grilled skewers. She lived simply, yet more peacefully than ever before. One morning, something felt different. Mr. Hassan was unusually quiet. He sat on a wooden bench by his cart, gazing at the glowing charcoal. Mari walked over, concerned. "Here," he said, handing her a warm cup of tea. "Drink this." She accepted it silently, watching him closely. Then, after a long pause, Mr. Hassan spoke. "Mari, I want to talk to you about something important." She straightened her posture. His voice was serious, and so was his expression. "I know you didn't come to Banyuwangi expecting any of this. Life brought you here by a winding path. And I'm not a rich man. I have no mansion, no business empire left. But I do have a heart that wishes to care for you." He placed a plate of satay on the table, the same table where their friendship had quietly grown. His eyes met hers with sincerity. "I don't have a ring. I don't have grand gestures. But I do have love, and a willingness to stand beside you, for whatever life brings next." It wasn't a proposal in a fancy restaurant. There were no candles, no violins. Just a warm cup of tea and a plate of satay. And yet, it was the most genuine offer Mari had ever received. Her eyes welled with tears. Without hesitation, she whispered, "Yes, I accept." The news of Mari and Mr. Hassan's engagement spread like wildfire through Banyuwangi. Markets buzzed with whispers. Mosques murmured with surprise. A former socialite from France, marrying a street vendor? Yet the people saw something deeper. Two souls who had both been broken, now healing in each other's light. And most surprising of all? Mari had no regrets. Not even a flicker. In the weeks that followed, she found herself preparing for the wedding with a calm heart. She helped clean the house, stitch curtains, and even learned to cook a few local dishes. Mr. Hassan, too, looked brighter. He started repairing the roof of their modest home. "This will be our place," he said with a grin. "Our own little corner of peace." Mari smiled, her heart full. For the first time, she wasn't chasing anything. She had already arrived. But they had no idea that someone from the past was already on their way, and would change everything once again. It was a bright morning. The sky over Banyuwangi stretched wide, and the scent of the sea danced through the breeze. Mari and Mr. Hassan sat in a roadside cafe, enjoying a breakfast of peso rice and warm tea. It had been several months since they married. Gone were the high heels and designer clothes. Mari now wore a simple veil and cotton dress. She spent her days helping at the satay stall, smiling with customers, sweeping the floor, and chatting with locals. But despite the joy, there was still one unanswered question: Mr. Hassan's past. Mari had always known there was more to him. Something in his mannerisms, the way he held himself, hinted at a life once filled with responsibility, and perhaps greatness. She never pressed. Until that day. They were walking through the market, shopping for ingredients, when a man in a sharp suit stopped dead in his tracks. "Pak Hassan. My God, is it really you?" Mr. Hassan froze. His expression unreadable. "It's been years," the man continued. "Danu, remember me?" There was a long pause before Mr. Hassan nodded, his voice calm. "Yes, it's been a long time, Danu." Mari looked between them, confused. "You disappeared," Danu said. "Everyone thought you were gone for good. But I've been investigating, and finally it's all clear now. The documents that took your company, they were fake. The court has ruled in your favor. The company is still yours. Mari's world tilted. Mr. Hassan, her humble, soft-spoken husband, was the rightful owner of a major company? That night, they sat in silence in their small home. Mr. Hassan finally spoke. I was once a businessman in Surabaya. I inherited my family's culinary company. It grew quickly. But I was betrayed by the person I trusted most. With false documents, he stole everything. His voice was quiet, but heavy with memory. I didn't want revenge. I left. I wanted peace, not power. Mari reached out and took his hand. She now understood the depth of his soul. His wealth had never been in titles or assets, but in humility. I don't want to go back, Mr. Hassan continued. But I've asked for a portion of the company to be sold. With that, I want to build something simple. A small restaurant. Here. Where we started. Mari nodded, her heart full. He wasn't chasing wealth, he was creating meaning. Months later, the restaurant opened, Hassan's satay stall, no longer a humble cart, but a cozy eatery serving recipes passed down through generations. Mari helped manage it. She welcomed guests, prepared meals, and shared smiles. She had never worked a day in hospitality before, but here, with Mr. Hassan, she had found her calling. They no longer lived in a palace, but in a home filled with warmth. They weren't surrounded by riches, but by respect, purpose, and love. Mari had once lived among chandeliers and champagne. Now, she found joy in tea and morning prayers. And at long last, she felt complete.